September, blah, 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 blah.
Welcome to the September
Bookoplathon.
Yes. So you read On a Night Like This.
I don't spoil it for him. Preparing my voice.
Oh.
La 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 la. So far, la ti ma ti da ti ba ti do bum 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 bum.
This will be at the start of the video. I hope you know.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to The Books Are Everywhere.
With us. We're here together for once.
Oh. As you may have noticed, I haven't actually done a September wrap-up yet because I wanted to do one with Mark because we both took part in the Bookoplathon, which was a readathon that took place in September and is run by Becca over at Becca and the Books. We did actually do a TBR video for the Bookoplathon at the start of September. If you do want to check that out, I will try and remember to link that down below. But it's essentially a readathon that is based on Becca's TBR game where she plays Monopoly to decide what she's going to read, and then she basically opens it up for the month of September. So we just wanted to do a wrap up together.
I was just going to try and redo my bit from the other take where it's like I didn't know that was a thing because I actually didn't know that that she did that every month as a TBR
You're
game.
giving away that we've done multiple takes.
Well, there's something happening outside and we've started again. So, but yeah, I didn't know that Becca did that as a monthly TBR game until you just said it. Or if I did know, I'd forgotten. I thought it was just like whatever thought it's like a yearly thing. But to do that every month is actually pretty cool. I should watch more of her videos. Not this month.
Because she's having some troubles with her reading, so she's mood reading for October. But anyway.
What's mood reading?
Just read what you want.
Oh, like most people.
So we thought we'd come and do our wrap up together for Bookoplathon and basically go through whether we were successful or not. So when we did play Bookopoly to decide what we were going to read in September, we both got TBR Veteran and TBR Game. So for TBR Veteran, I decided to read A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Camera, which is the third and final book in the Cursebreakers series, which starts with A Curse So Dark and Lonely. And you read
On a Night Like This, this delightful proof of On a Night Like This that I've had hanging around for
about a year
because it came out last November, by Lindsay Kelk, who I really enjoy. The book, Lindsay Kelk, you bizarrely chapped at different points of my life somehow. And this, when I finally got to read this, the week I read it in was such a unintentional, tumultuous week that this ended up being another instance. I read one the first time I ran a marathon. I read one when I was moving house. I read one when we had the big sale. So this was, thank you, it was perfect.
I'm glad. What's that book about?
It is about...
I've read it.
A lady who takes a job...
as like a personal assistant.
Yeah, I've got something interesting to say about this because I think the title was something different at one point. So she takes a job for 5 days, which is like you must take this job, it's an opportunity. She's a personal assistant. She's been out of work for a while. Her trash boyfriend wants her to get into teaching. They're clearly not going to be together by the end of it. And so it's a rom-com, folks. It's a nice rom-com book. And she leaves a note for the boyfriend who doesn't want to talk about it, which says, see you next Tuesday. This book was definitely at some point called See You Next Tuesday. I 100% believe it was called Let Us See You Next Tuesday. And the good people at HarperCollins went, you can't call a book that. I 100% believe that. And if I meet Lindsay Kelk again, I'm going to ask it. Or answer. Put it in the comments down below, Lindsay. Hashtag Lindsay Kelk. Lindsay, Doug.
Butchered that.
Yeah, I did. Never mind. Carry on. My show must go on. I really liked it. It's about the crazy adventures she goes on PAing for a pop star, massive pop star. But she takes a job without knowing that's what the assignment's going to be, and the roller coaster ride that comes out of it, leading up to what's the Diamond Ball?
Yeah, the Diamond Ball, I think.
Which is like the year's most fictional and star-studded event. So...
very entertaining book. I
really liked it.
Yeah, me too.
I really, really, really liked it.
Yeah, me too.
And I've slightly bent it.
And there is another book coming out by Lindsay Kelk.
Yes, we have another Lindsay Kelk coming up that I'll read at some point.
Which is called The Christmas Wish, which we're both very much looking forward to, and comes out in November this year. And
this is another proof from the
thank you to
Harper
Insider / Al at Harper Insider for sending me this as well, because we are both big fans of well, you're a bigger fan of
I'm a big fan of
and
Lindsay
you
Kelk.
got me to read a Lindsay Kelk book.
I enjoyed this.
Yes.
And I enjoyed the hidden wrestling references that she puts in those books, which I think are just for me. I think I'm the only person in the Venn diagram of wrestling fans, which she is, and rom-com readers. I can't imagine there's many more. But okay.
And I read this one, which I'm sure you guys know what Curse Breakers is about because I feel like I've talked about it a lot on my channel, but it's basically following Prince Ren and Harper. Harper is from real life Washington DC, and Prince Ren is trapped in this fictional world, or lives in this fictional world in which Harper is like dragged into, and Ren is cursed to repeat the autumn of his 16th year. And I feel like Bridget Camera, because she does write this like crossover of contemporary fantasy, it reads really, really easily, which is the same for this book. And I did really enjoy this. I can't talk a lot about this because it is the third book in the series, so obviously things have kind of changed and moved on from the first book.
No spoilers.
I do really enjoy this. I feel like
no spoilers.
they read really easily.
I said spoilers. I'm really messing up these hashtags. If we put these actual hashtags down below, they're going to be nonsense. No spoilers and Lindsay Kelk.
I won't be getting any traction from those hashtags.
No traction. Put the real ones down there as well.
But yeah, I did really enjoy this. What did I rate it?
I don't do ratings, by the way. I liked my book.
I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars.
Oh. Is that the last?
This is the last one in this series.
The
However, there is a spin-off series called Forging Silver into Stars. I don't know if it has a series title, but that's the first book name, which I would like to read very soon, and I do have the first one.
It's out?
Yes.
The first one is out?
Yes.
I also read that for romance, by the way, because I was doubling up, because I was supposed to read 8 books on my, because I got, the game went wildly badly, and I ended up with 8 books. I'm starting on 5, and I ended up with 8, and we think we got it down to 6?
Yes.
And so, yeah, I read on a night like this for romance and TBR Veteran.
Nice.
So.
Also both got TBR games, so we played Gavin's old TBR game, which he doesn't play anymore, which is Play Your TBR Right, which is based on Play Your Cards Right. And yeah, we played that in the video as well for the TBR that we did for Bookoplathon. And
it's down there.
I got Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which I absolutely love. But thank you to the people at Penguin who not only sent me a proof before this came out, but have recently sent me a signed proof because I did win a competition over on Twitter. So thank you, Queen Rin and the people at Penguin Huddle for sending me this because I was very excited.
And it's about?
It is about 2 friends. It's set in It starts in 1987, but then it moves on quite a lot from there, and it's about 2 friends who start making video games together. It's very emotional, it's very heavy in a lot of places. I would say look up trigger warnings if you are going to read it, but it is very heavy. It's very lyrically written, and I feel like the writing is kind of like Marmite. You'll love it or hate it, and I completely understand why people, like, I think if you love this book, you absolutely really, really, really love this book. But I can also see why some people don't get on with it as well. But it's about love and romance and friendship.
I'm sorry.
You knew that was coming.
I knew it was coming. I thought I could hold it in. I was smiling because I'm like, I want to sneeze, but I'm not going to.
But yeah, this is about love and friendship and romance and loss and grief and so many other things. And I listened to the audiobook of it, which was also absolutely beautiful. And I would love to annotate this book and go through with a highlighter, which I don't often say about books, but I would absolutely love to do it with this one. And it would also make me read the physical version, which I would like to do. Yeah, absolutely love this. Probably my favourite book of the year so far. 5 out of 5 stars. I want to give it to everybody and I want to reread it immediately.
I will be reading it at some point because of that high praise.
And I'll badger you until you do.
Yeah. And I'll probably give it to people for Christmas because they copy your favourite book of the year and give it to people.
It's true.
Look out!
I'm sorry,
Lisa, you're going to get a copy of...
I'm sorry to everybody who gets a copy of my favourite book of the year because they're always really sad.
Oh no.
Addy.
Oh, yes, so sad. And I read for was this just for TBR game?
This was for TBR
just for TBR game, and unintentionally because we copied Gavin's, I read How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Which is pretty great, actually.
I haven't read it, but I really should.
I really liked it. I thought it was really good fun. I mixed it with the audiobook, which is the worst mixed audiobook of all time.
Oh dear.
It's really quiet. David Tennant does it.
Oh, cool.
And he does really well because it does all the voices. But occasionally he'll be like, I'm shouting now! And then he'll go back to being, and then Hiccup went to the market. And you're like, oh God. And if you're driving, it's impossible to get the mix right. But anyway, otherwise, lovely book. And actually, it's got like lovely sketches and stuff throughout it. Well, not lovely sketches, but like nice sort of scratchy, stylized stuff throughout it. Which I assume is Krista as well, because there's no one else listed, so I assume she does both things. But there's that, and then in the middle there's a copy of
How to Train Your Dragon.
How to Train Your Dragon, which is a joke within the book, which I won't spoil. And yeah, I really I don't know if I'll read the other ones, but I might do down the road. And it's so different from the film that I'm so glad I read it, because it's really odd.
I've never seen the film.
Have you not?
No.
I think we've discussed that, actually. We should watch them.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I read it, and it's really interesting. And I'm curious to know what happens in the other ones, but whether there'll be time to read them down the road, I don't know, because there's quite a lot of them, I think.
Yeah, there is quite a lot. There's like 12 or something now.
But it's a fascinating, because I heard her talk about the book on the radio in relation to the film, and then I suddenly got curious about the book, and so I decided to pick it up because of that, and I read it because of TBR Game.
Okay, so now we are on different prompts. So I guess choose whichever book you'd like to talk about next.
Next one on the pile.
But the next one I'm going to talk about is a book that features a death, in which I chose Nothing More to Tell by Karen M. McManus, because I feel like that's a difficult prompt to choose before you've read a book, but Karen M. McManus writes a YA thriller, so I was pretty sure there was going to be a death that was going to be investigated, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I really like Karen M. McManus, and I've read all of her books to date, and again, thank you to Penguin for sending me a copy of this, but I really liked this one. I feel like Two Can Keep a Secret is definitely still my favourite Karen M. McManus book, although that's more on a memory because it's been so long since I read it now. And then The Cousins was also really up there, which I read on our anniversary, around our anniversary last year when we were away.
Oh, okay.
And this one is also really up there. These are great books to read if you're in a slump because they're so quick. I listened to the audiobook for most of it, and I was about 85 pages away from the end and thought one evening, I'll just read a chapter or two physically, and ended up finishing it and reading the rest in one sitting because I just wanted to know what was going on. But this one follows two main characters. I think it's alternate points of view, if I remember rightly, it is. Bryn and Trip. Trip found the body of one of his teachers, and Bryn is basically investigating it as part of an internship she's doing. She used to be at the school with Trip, and she used to be friends with Trip, and now she's moved away and she's moving back. And she's doing this kind of investigative journalism stuff with this true crime podcast, maybe they do. I can't remember what they do. True crime media outlet. But anyway, this is very, very gripping, kept me hooked to the very end, and honestly it doesn't give you anything. Like I feel like I wasn't necessarily surprised by the person who did the murdering. The reveals. But I was still, like, there's so many twists and turns and you don't find out until, like, the last 5 pages, so you have to read till the very end. It really kept me gripped. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars.
How many murders?
Yeah. There's only one murder that I remember, but there is many involvements.
Ooh. Okay.
And
That's not what I expected.
Are you going to talk about Solaris then?
I'm going to talk about Solaris, which I read I just looked at this. And
Features a mystery.
Features a mystery. I read,
now
this is an odd one, but I read Solaris by Stanislav Lem. And, but I actually didn't read it because in starting it, finding some things a bit odd and then reading some context around it, I discovered that Stanislav Lem hated this translation of it because it was translated into French.
Oh, and then translated
into English. And apparently he spoke English quite well and didn't like it. So after his death in 2018, there was the definitive edition done, which was translated by whatever name it says under that little only for Audible label.
Alessandra something.
But because of legal reasons, this can't be released as a book.
Oh, that's so strange.
Probably because the good people at Faber and Faber hold the rights to the old translation. So this is only available as an audiobook. So I read the preferred translation from 10 odd years ago, whenever it was. I think it was translated in 2011. It's turned into an audiobook a couple of years ago.
Right.
And probably legal disputes around that. And And I kind of, every now and again, I would dip in and out to see what the differences were. Because there's still some very odd language in this thing. A few terms you definitely wouldn't use now, even in a modern translation. So I found that a bit odd. So I would go back into the other one to see what the old translation was, to see what it was like. They're quite close, but I get where the nuance changes because it's gone into a language like French or whatever, and where it's skewed quite different in some of the spirit of versus letter of translations. And I know from work, actually, that Polish is a really, really difficult language to translate into. So getting it out must be as bad. So it was really interesting to discover that. But because of that, I ended up listening to it on phone, or in car, as the case may be. And I really, really enjoyed it. It really, really moved me. It's about a psychologist, scientist guy who goes to planet of Solaris, where there is not a space station. It's a space station in the films, bizarrely, but actually in the book it's effectively on the ground on Solaris, where they've been studying this alien planet for years, and it's actually become like part of a human endeavour to figure out the mysteries of Solaris. But we're in the sort of back half of that mystery, say it's been doing for 50 years or something, and Earth has kind of lost interest in it, and it's all just become quite futile, and they've kind of lost connection with the people on the planet. So there's a couple of people left there, and Kelvin, who is best friends with, or was best friends with, Jabarian, who is one of the scientists there. So he goes up there to find out what's happening, and or what has happened and stuff. So he gets there, and then it's kind of like it's one of those, like, if you stare into the abyss stares into you things, and it's almost like the planet is trying to communicate back with the people. But it's also, it's so much more than that. But I don't want to spoil it because I know you've not seen anything. I've seen both the films. And I think there was a play I once listened to, and I've always been fascinated by it. And having read the book, I'm even more fascinated by it, because actually, in the same way, I don't think Lem liked certainly the Russian film that was made of it in the 70s. I think he was still alive when the other one was made in the early 2000s, but he wasn't a big fan of those because they made it weirdly. They can almost make it like a romance thing, but the point of it is so different. It really stuck with me.
Hearing you talk about it now kind of very loosely reminds me of this book, How High We Go in the Dark.
Oh, you've talked about
which I read about 4 months ago maybe, which is a very, very sad, emotional book that is kind of dystopian, and it's a collection of short stories that are kind of linked, and it feels like a short story out of that. Like, it feels like it could kind of fit in that collection.
It's very, as a book, one of the reasons I wanted to read it is that it's been very influential over the years on different kinds of sci-fi. Right. Certainly a lot of TV sci-fi and stuff has pulled from him, and he also wrote other books, obviously. Yeah. But the book is so different from the film in the same way How to Train Your Dragon was. Like, I think actually, if you took them as examples, I would say the How to Train Your Dragon film elevated the book. Yeah. And I would say the book elevates the film of Solaris, or the film dumbs down the book of Solaris. Like, it's almost like it's like if I tried to communicate what it's really about, or what I think it's really about to you, it would be very difficult to do. So actually carrying that across into a visual medium is very difficult, because you almost have to live the journey of the book together. Big fan.
I'm glad.
I don't do ratings, but one of them.
We're going to put a light on now, so...
Is that blocking it out? That's not blocking it out, that's just showing on the back of the book.
So the next prompt I had was a big book, so more than 500 pages, in which I read Any Way the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell, which is the third book in the Carry On series, which is about Simon Snow, who is the chosen one that should have never been chosen, and is basically a shit wizard, is the idea of the book, and is also a... He's
a really bad wizard, or he's a wizard who exclusively uses...
He's a bad wizard.
Okay, good, because the other thing is not what I'm thinking about.
And he has a love-to-hate relationship with his roommate Baz, and it's following them. But this is the last book in the series, so I'm not going to tell you too much about this because it is the last book in the series. These books, I do enjoy them. I listened to the audiobook of this one because it is quite chunky, but I do remember reading Any Way the Wind Blows, what's the second book called? This is the third book. Wayward Son, the second book, physically, and finding it quite easy to read because, again, same as Bridget Camera, Rainbow Rowell writes a lot of contemporary as well, and that does come across in her fantasy writing. But yeah, I do like these books. I feel like they have a real found family aspect to them, which I enjoy. However, I did feel like the plot of this was slightly pointless. Like, I just didn't really feel like there was a lot to move towards in this book. It just didn't feel like it was really plotted out that well or laid out that well.
For a book that big?
Yeah,
Ooh,
I don't know. I just didn't feel like I was that engaged in the plot.
This is Rainbow Rowell writes comics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Runaways. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So yeah.
Just put that together.
But yeah, I do still enjoy this series. I think I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It feels like a 3.5. Oh, I gave it a 4 apparently. There is a lot of stuff that I do love about this book, and they are very entertaining, and I love the found family friendship aspect. But yeah, this one, it did feel like it was not as well plotted out as the previous books.
Would you have liked it more if it had been half the size? Like, is the
possibly,
ramble part of it?
I also feel like that's a hard thing to pinpoint because of the fact I listened to it on audio.
Okay.
Maybe I'd have noticed that a bit more if I was reading it physically. Maybe it'd have felt like it was too long. I'm not going to say it's too long because I don't really know if that's how I feel about it. I just feel like for a book of this size, maybe it felt like we weren't really getting anywhere for a lot of it. Which I have talked about to other people who've read it, and they've kind of said the same thing. So yeah, but anyway, I do still really like this series, and I'm glad I've read it, and I'm glad I finished it. And I carried on with it, and this edition is very beautiful. But yeah, I did feel like a little bit pointless in places. But anyway, I read that.
How many were there of these?
This is the third one in the trilogy.
Where does Carry On Camping go in there?
Way before.
Terrible joke. I'm so sorry. Also, Carry On Camping. I mean, Carry On Cleo. Carry On. There's Benny. There's There's very there's
a lot of Carry On films.
There's many good ones as well.
And you went for Carry On Camping.
And Carry On Camping is not one I really relate to. It's just famous.
And what are you going to go for next?
I'm going to talk about Youure Dead, which I was reading for
highest rated. Is that true?
No.
Emoji
because and
ghosts.
Summer, and I failed to start. So this wasn't a DNF. This was a
did not.
DNS. Yeah. So I didn't get to it before the month was up. So it's rolled over, and now I'm reading it for Spoopathon, which is what's happening right now. So I am reading it, and I'm quite enjoying it. Actually, I think it's really good.
Yeah.
But
and I'm reading Mina and the Slayers, which is the second book.
Again, I'm a year behind. But yeah, I didn't get to it for Bookoplathon. So I am technically a Bookoplathon 2002 failure.
2002.
What did I say? 2002? Anyway, I unfortunately did not start it, but now I'm reading it. I think it's really good.
So the next book I read was for People, which is Some Girls Do by Jennifer Duggan, because this has people on the cover, and has the word girls in it.
Ooh, that took a little moment for me to realise how painful it was. Sorry, what did you read this one for?
People. Are you okay? Did I actually hurt
No, you didn't touch me.
I read this for People.
That was just a prompt? Was prompt just people?
Yeah.
Mind you, one of mine was emoji.
And
so.
it says girls in the title, and there's people on the cover.
She plays this every month.
So People.
How? What happens if you just get, like, people? Like, how do you...
Then you can pick from a wide range of books.
That's
so
true.
They're
very broad prompts,
yeah.
I suppose. That's good game. I never doubted it.
So this one's following Morgan, who is a track athlete who moves to a new school from her private school because she moved out of her private school because they had a problem with her being gay, and she's moved to this new school where she then goes to school with Ruby, who really loves her car. She has a 1970s Ford. What's it called? Torino.
Yeah.
Thank you. Torino.
I was looking at the cover. And Torino's had stripes.
Yes. But she's also a beauty pageant. And it's basically beauty pageant. She's a beauty
pageant. She's a beauty pageant and she drives a Ford Torino.
She's a beauty pageant queen.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Participant. Is that the right word?
Yep.
Do you participate in a beauty pageant?
Oh, well, my mother wouldn't let me, but...
And they are basically drawn to each other at the school, and they kind of can't really explain it. It's a bit of a love-hate relationship.
It's set in the 70s?
No, it's not. She just has a 1970s
Okay.
Ford Torino. It is set in present day.
That's a classic car right now. I mean,
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
almost 50-year-old car.
Yeah. But this one wasn't perfect, but I did enjoy it. It was very easy to read. This is the first Jennifer Duggan book that I've read, and I've wanted to read one of her books for a while. But I feel like both of the characters do questionable things, and the way that they go about their relationship is sometimes a bit questionable. But I did still enjoy it. I feel like it handled at least some of the kind of difficulties that they had quite well. I wasn't fully on board some of the time, but I did still like reading this one. And I'm glad to have finally read a Jennifer Duggan book. I do have 2 others of hers that I'm going to read, which is Verona Comics and
another one.
Which is not Hot Dog Girl, which is her like most famous book.
Oh. Of course, everyone knows that the correct 1971 muscle car, if you're going to have one, is the Hemi Barracuda, which they stopped producing in 1971. Some of them have 1972 parts because they were made so late in 1971 that they had to put 1972 parts in them. But technically, it was produced from 1968 to 1971. The Hemi Barracuda is the correct muscle car.
I also have Mount With You by Jennifer Duggan, which I would like to read soon, but I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars.
I want a Hemi Cuda. They're insanely... They had to stop producing them. They're too powerful.
What did you read next?
I read Blood and Fire, the unbelievable story of wrestling's original Sheik, by Brian R. Solomon. And it was a biography of Edward Farhat, who would punch you if you said his real name, who was the Sheik from the late 1940s or 50s through to about 2000, actually, when he finally retired. He was about 80 when he finally retired. Who was a journeyman wrestler in from the big days of the 50s through the slump period, through the 70s again when it was famous again, and then was considered an influential figure through the 90s, really. So it was basically his whole life story, from military service and being a young man through to becoming the Sheik, who was a famous villain in wrestling, and then his whole life journey through to his death, which actually the end of this book made me cry. Not ashamed to tell you that. It was quite an emotional journey.
Audio, right?
I mixed and matched. I did that with a few of these books.
Yeah.
This is quite illustrated, actually, because obviously there's a lot of magazines and stuff. So there's a lot of pictures and stuff throughout this book which are worth seeing. There he is with some guy on TV interviewing him, for instance. But no, I love these kind of books. I love a sort of documentary book, for want of a better term. And this was not a disappointment. Brian R. Solomon.
And you read this for highest rated,
This was
right?
highest rated, yes,
highest
because
rated.
bizarrely, of the ones I was considering reading, this was the highest rated on Goodreads, right?
Yeah.
Who knew?
There you go.
Good for you, Brian. Good book.
Okay, the next one I read, which is the last one I'm going to talk about, is You've Reached Sam, which I read for sat or been published since 2020, which is at least published since 2020. I'm not sure about set. At least one of these books did mention the pandemic in, like, retrospect. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can't remember which one, but I feel like at least one of them talked about the pandemic. It might have been this one. But anyway, at least published since 2020. And I've wanted to read this one for a while, since before it came out, and I got my hands on this beautiful hardback edition, which has some cherry blossom underneath the cover, which I absolutely love. And I listened to this one on audiobook.
Show me.
It did make me quite emotional.
Oh, that's really nice.
And this one is following Julie and Sam. Sam has just passed away, and they are only 17. She is absolutely heartbroken. She goes to his belongings, and I think she throws out his belongings at the start of the book, but then she ends up calling him, and the call goes through. And she effectively starts talking to him after he's died. And that is the premise of this book. And it's very emotional and very beautifully written. I kind of half expected this book to be a 5-star read, and it wasn't quite a 5-star read, but I did still really enjoy it. And I feel like the audiobook was done really well. It did make me a little emotional, but I didn't really cry as much as I expected to. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars in the end, but there was a lot in it that I really, really liked. And I do feel like the audiobook was done well. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars.
Was there not one that was a bit similar but was text message based?
There was one called oh god, what was
Where
it
the person
called?
had
Yeah,
died.
it's by Dante Medina. Message Not Found.
Okay.
Which I do I even have that? So I must still have it.
I hope so.
Or do
I was
you
gonna,
have it?
Oh, did you give it to me? I was
I
about to say I
think
wanted
you
to
might
read it
have
because it
I
sounded
think
interesting.
it might be in your bedroom.
Oh, fair enough.
And
Can't
it is
hear it.
about a best friend who dies, and they create a like bot
Oh, a
after she
chatbot
dies.
thing,
Yeah,
yeah,
they
that
like
was it, yeah.
upload all of the messages between her. But there is also like this mystery surrounding how she died, and she
Like a country road or
yeah,
ice
she
road
like
or
drives
something.
off a country road. They don't know why it happens, and they upload all the messages from not only between like her and the person who dies, but also like her, the person who dies, and other people, and it kind of uncovers things about her that they didn't know.
Connection.
Really enjoyed that book as well. That was really good.
But this book was
Yes.
called,
You've Reached Sam.
and you rated that one?
4 out of 5 stars.
There we go.
What did you read for your last one?
My last book was reader
Becca recommendation.
Becca recommendations, and I started Sago by Brian K. Vaughan and I forgot the name of the artist, Fiona Staples, which I wanted to read for a very long time, and I've had this for quite a while. At this point, I remember buying it with you, right, with that voucher thing I had.
Yes.
And this is the omnibus edition or whatever you want to call it, which is the this has the first 18. It's subdivided as chapters, but issues, I suppose. And I started it, so I'm a little way into it, and it's really good. Like, I don't know what, considering this has been going since 2013, and is now up to. They took a break, but I think it's 80 odd issues in.
Right. Yeah.
I'm surprised this isn't a TV show or
really?
something already, and isn't massive in a cross media thing.
Yeah.
It sets up an alien war with a child that's born from both sides, from a prisoner and a prisoner of war. That is exactly what you think it is. Yes, is one of the most famous things about it is the fact that it's one of the only comic series that can get away with and justify having a breastfeeding baby on the cover, and that also includes different variants of how that cover is achieved.
Oh.
But it's the artwork is absolutely gorgeous. Let me find an earlier thing. So you've got the alien races, different races, sort of fighting each other. The father is a prisoner of war who's kind of almost like a fawn, so to speak. He's got horns and things. The mother is fae almost, like she's got wings. The child is a mix of the two. Obviously, because that's how
babies work.
That's how babies work, and they're effectively being hunted by the military sides, but also there's bounty hunters sent after them. It's surprisingly foul-mouthed, but it makes it quite light.
Yeah,
like it's quite worthy, but it's quite light. It's a real balancing act. I mean, I knew Brian Vaughan's a great writer anyway, but this is not what I expected from this. I expected worthy sci-fi, and this is crazy, robots and mythical creatures on alien planets and stuff. Like, it's a hell of a thing. It's quite adult, but it's hell of a thing. And I gave it. I don't do ratings, so I gave it. I'm going to carry on reading all of it. That's what I'm going. I'm going to give them more money to buy more of it.
That's a good sign.
And I will. I think there's 5 omnibuses now. And I think it's now back from break. They took a break during the pandemic. I think possibly earlier in the pandemic for a little while, and I think it's coming back now because I think there is a. I think this is the equivalent of a novel for comics. I think there is a plan of where this is going, so it will have an ending in the same way Invincible did by someone else, which is just wrapped up. But I think the plan is to do, however, like 100 issues, and it'll be done, or whatever, thereabouts. It might not be 100, but so I'm curious to see how it pans out, and I will end up with hopefully all these nice editions because I think these are fun. Although they've started doing an even bigger one of these.
Yeah, I know, I've seen it.
So crazy, really, because this is a lot. Anyway.
That's what we read.
Thank you for joining us on everything we read for Bookoplathon in September of 2002, apparently, or 2022 in reality.
I think we both managed to read 6 books. Or
No, I did 5 because I didn't read Mina.
And I think I read... How many do we have here? I read 6, but then I did also read Girls in Love by Jacqueline Wilson right at the start, which I'm only going to give a brief mention to in terms of
September
I did
wrap-up.
enjoy it. Yeah, if we're going to call this a September wrap-up as well as a Bookoplathon wrap-up, I do feel like I should also include that. I did enjoy it and I did give it 4 stars, but only really on memory. I absolutely love Jacqueline Wilson. She's one of my favourite authors of all time because I grew up reading her books. However, reading her books in retrospect is very different to reading her books as an 11-year-old. Because
Was this
they
a
are...
book that was for that audience?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So she only really writes for children.
I thought she wrote some... Well, yeah, children, but different age ranges of children.
Yeah, I mean, Girls in Love is technically teen. But I read it probably when I was like 11 or 12, and I would say it is more for like pre-teen, middle school than teen, because it is they come across as very young.
Okay.
And it is very focused on, I mean, it's called Girls in Love, the series, and the first book is very focused on how the main character, who I can't remember the name of, wants a boyfriend. And it reads very, I don't know, I feel like there could be a lot of problems with it now. If you thought about it too much. It's from the 90s.
Okay.
I can't remember quite when. It was published in 97 originally, and I would have read it 2010ish, I guess.
Okay.
But I feel like, you know, I'm always going to have a place in my heart for those books because they were something I held very dear to me as a kid. So I'm obviously still going to always hold a place in my heart for them.
But that's a 25-year-old book.
It's a 25-year-old book, and in a lot of ways it reads as a 25-year-old book. So I do have mixed feelings about it now, but I did still enjoy it. But anyway, that is everything that we read in the month of September. I hope you've enjoyed watching this and finding out how we did in Becca's Bookoplathon.
I'm super excited to see how long this video ends up.
And we are also both taking part in Spoopathon as well.
We are, but look at other materials for how we're getting on with Spoopathon.
And we will see you in another video, probably about Spoopathon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.